Hello, my dirty girls, and welcome to another Training Tuesday. It is Tuesday night. It is a few minutes after 6 o'clock. I was having some technology issues, so I'm running a little bit late, and I apologize for that. But very excited to be here tonight. So, tonight for Training Tuesday, we're kicking off a new series. This series is based on the 5 blocks that we need to smash in order to really kind of own our value and move our careers ahead. And they're based on 5 kind of very common sort of gremlin blocks. And by gremlin blocks, I mean, yeah, we're talking about the all important, always present imposter syndrome. So I had created this workbook for you guys a year ago, maybe. And so I'm happy to share it with you again, which I will, throughout this series. But in this series, what I'm going through are what are the 5 blocks that we have to overcome in order to really move ahead in how we're showing up in our career. And these are the blocks that are really what I call the internal blocks. They're ones that we can actually do something about, take proactive action around. So tonight, I want to focus on each one of the blocks. Sometimes when I talk to you guys about the things that we're doing in the strategies, like I run through 3 to 5 things. And I was thinking with this that it would be more fun and more useful to take time to really dive into each one, because they're each a different flavor of that imposter syndrome experience that we have. So I wanted to be sure that we had a chance to have a full discussion, really dive into it, and really think through how we can conquer these blocks and what that could mean for what your career looks like and what you look like how you show up as a leader going forward. So I want to dive into the first block, and the first block is all about waiting to be recognized. And I know we've all done this. So before I do, I want to say welcome again to Training Tuesday. We're here every Tuesday on a different topic. And I see that my friends are here. Hello, Pamela, Joyce, and Jackie are here. It is great to see you guys. Thanks for joining. If this is your first Training Tuesday, welcome. We're here every week with a different topic. We're kicking off this series on 5 gremlin blocks, or 5 imposter syndrome blocks. Those things are related. And tonight we're tackling block number 1. I like these to be as interactive as possible, so also looking forward to your questions, your comments, share your stories with me, with each other. I try to follow the comments as best I can when going through this, and I'd love for this to be more of a dialogue and a conversation. So as always, I invite you to say hello, share your stories and ideas, and just support each other as we explore this. So I wonder how often you wait to be noticed. And we do this, like I said, we do this personally and professionally, but I almost think it's more prevalent in our professional lives to sort of sit back and think, my work speaks for itself. I do good work. They should know. They should notice. And I've been guilty of this. I have worked on projects, multiple, because sometimes we have to learn a lesson more than once before it sticks. But I've been guilty of working on projects that were successful, that went really well, really smoothly, and I shared it with my boss, I shared it with my team, and I got a, hey, that's great. And then they moved on. And in my head, like, the accomplishment was worth, I don't know, more than a passing hey and move on. It was worth attention. It was worth potentially, I don't know, a raise. It was worth some sort of bonus, because there was enough work that I was doing that merited that. And yet when I put it out there, I really didn't get the feedback or the response that I wanted. And that gets to be disheartening. If you've ever worked in an environment where you feel like your contribution, the work that you're doing, it just doesn't matter, or it doesn't have an impact, that's frustrating. You know, as much as we will joke, and I've joked about this, as much as we joke about having that job where we don't have a lot of responsibility, or nobody really knows what we're doing, and we're hidden under the covers. As much as we joke about that, the truth is we're miserable when we're in that role. We want our jobs to matter. We want the work that we do, the work that we produce, to have an impact, to make a difference. Now, whether that makes a difference on our team, on our customers or clients, on the business as a whole, depends on the job we're doing and the kind of impact we want to have. But having a role where you feel like what you do is not recognized and doesn't matter is frustrating. So I have been guilty of sitting around and waiting for my boss to notice. And then my frustration increases because my boss doesn't notice, or doesn't notice in the way that I want. And what ends up happening is I start getting very disgruntled. I start thinking that I'm not appreciated here, so I need to go somewhere else. I start questioning my value. Maybe what I'm doing doesn't matter. Maybe the work I'm doing isn't as good as I thought it was going to be. Maybe I'm focused on the wrong things and nobody's telling me. Right? It actually erodes a bit at our sense of self, our not just our self-esteem or our ego, but our actual sense of self and the value that we bring in our productivity if you let this ride out too long. So one of the things we have to kind of flip on its head is this idea that our work should be recognized by others based solely on the merit that the work was done. By that I mean waiting for others to recognize not only that you did the work, but that also the work had value and what that value is. And you've heard me talk about this before, right? As long as we leave it up to other people to decide what the value is of what we've done, then they're going to put the weight on it of what it means to them in their world right now, which may not be the true value of the work. It may not be, making noise here. It may not be the value that you see the work having on the business or on your team. One of the ways that we show up as leaders is by owning the narrative. And when I say own the narrative, I mean we own our story. We are the ones in control of how the information that we share, the things that we do, we're in control of telling the story of why this matters, of why this is important. And the more that we can own the story, and when you think about it, that's a classic PR term. If you've ever worked with PR agencies, right, they want you to own the narrative. Because if you own the narrative, then you have some influence over how it's being received and perceived. So we're going to talk a little bit about how you are going to own your own narrative. So Joyce, I'm just looking at your comment here. I feel like I'm not sure what I'm doing is important enough for anyone to be, and that's the challenge, right? If we're not sure, and the question I guess comes is are you initially not sure that it's important, and so you're wondering why you even do it? Or did you go into it thinking this is important and this matters, but since you didn't get the feedback you were looking for or the support you were looking for, now you're questioning if it really mattered at all? The order of that is important, because if you're going into work or a project and thinking this doesn't even matter, why am I bothering? Then that's a conversation to have about what is my role here and what is the value that the company expects me to bring, and go figuring out how to tackle that. But if the question is more, this was important, I thought it was important, I dove into it, and then I didn't get the support and feedback that I thought I was going to get because other people initially told me it was important and then they forgot about it, that's where you need to own the narrative and remind people of why this was important, why you were tackling this, what is the impact that it has. Here's the thing, we get stuck in this trap of waiting for people to recognize the work that we're doing, recognize the value that it brings, recognize that we're the talent that made it all happen. But when you're in that trap of waiting for others to do it, you're forgetting that they have their own projects, they have their own priorities, they have their own stuff going on. They're not watching you as closely as you think. They're not paying nearly as much attention to the projects you're working on, to the goals you've set, or even to what you've achieved. They're not paying nearly as much attention. as you are to these things. And they might have at one time, like initially you kicked off this great project, it seemed very important to everybody, and then 3 months later when it's done and you say it's done, everybody gives you, oh, that's great. And they move on. And you're like, wait a minute, this is a big deal. It's because they've moved on with their priorities. Your priority is not always the priority of your boss or your teammates or your peers. Your priority may not even be a top priority for the company, but that doesn't mean it's not important. And that's why it's critical for you to be able to state what is the value of the project you're working on. What is that bringing? That not only will give you a personal sense of satisfaction, that helps you communicate value much more clearly to everyone around you, especially if they've already moved on or if they've forgotten why this wasn't a big initiative in the first place. So Joyce, I think it's important, but then notice, yes. So exactly. So this is perfect, Joyce. What you're talking about is perfect for what we're talking about tonight. Because they may not notice because they have their own stuff going on. They have their own goals to hit. They have their own crises that they're trying to manage. They have their own teams they're trying to babysit and figure out. And so it's great that you did it, but they got other things to worry about. And we have to break through a little bit of that clutter and remind them this is why it's important. So what I want to talk about tonight is how do you present yourself? How do you think about how you present your work? How you talk about what it is that you're doing and align that to telling a story that shows just how important your work is, that puts you in a good relationship and a good position with your team and with your boss, and that helps you build your reputation inside the company. So I just see Jackie pop up here. I gotta get my reading glasses on here, ladies. I am just going blind tonight. So what did you say? When they do notice, it's like you said, it's a quick acknowledgement. Yeah. And I gotta tell you something, that quick acknowledgement, it feels so dismissive. Like you put all your work, you put all this energy into doing this thing that even 2 weeks ago, right? Everybody was excited and everybody was on board with, and then you say, hey, it's done, and you get, oh yeah, that's great. It's so disheartening and frustrating. Because you're thinking, I just put a bunch of energy into that thing. And oh, by the way, it kicks ass. But everybody else is like, yeah, I have moved on. So good for you. So we got to realign priorities and values here. So I'm going to go back actually to something we talked about a few weeks ago. We talked about managing up. One of the first ways that you can make your value and what you do relevant to the company as a whole, but specifically to your boss and even to your team, is by thinking through these things that you're working on, whether it's a special project that has a limited time frame or if it's your day-to-day work. How do you map your day-to-day work or these projects to the goals that your boss has? Our job, when I talked about managing up, right, one of the critical things to remember when we're trying to manage up, we're trying to manage our boss and our boss's boss, is to remember what are their goals, what are their priorities. We are hired to make them look good. And then one day you're promoted and you're still hired to make your boss look good. Although you may have a team underneath you that you're hiring to make you look good. But managing up is all about aligning everything I work on is going to help my boss hit his or her goal. And she's aligned to helping her boss hit their goal. So the first thing you wanted to kind of take an assessment around is, how is my work or how is this project supporting my boss in reaching her goals? How is it helping her do her job better? How is it helping her just look better? How is it helping the company move forward? If you're working on projects that you cannot define how it supports the growth of the business or the objectives of your boss, then I would seriously reconsider why you're working on those projects. Or if you have a day-to-day task that isn't it, there sometimes this this happens way often in corporate America. We get trapped in day-to-day projects and tasks that really don't add value. Sometimes we feel stuck in that. I literally just had a conversation this week. Was invited to a series of meetings that are all reviews. They're all operational reviews for how a business unit is functioning. One business unit. And when I tallied it up, it was 20 hours worth of meetings. 20 hours worth of meetings all around the operational review of this particular business unit. And that doesn't count the time it takes to prepare for those meetings. Because, of course, everybody wants a PowerPoint deck. So it doesn't count like the time it takes to prepare for those meetings. 20 hours in a month, that's half a week in a month of just sitting in meetings. And that's not any of the other meetings going on at this company. That's just the operational reviews. No value. That is one of the things I pointed out to the leadership. Is like, this is a no value use of time of your executives to be sitting in meetings, going over the same information, by the way. The information doesn't change very much from week to week over the course of the month, you know. Anyway, that would be an example of looking at, if I can't align how I'm spending that time to how it's supporting my boss's goals or the company goals, got to rethink how we're spending that time. So that's step number one, is how are you supporting the goals of your boss? Step number two gets to the uncomfortable part, which is, how are you going to share this information? This is where we get to the, I don't want to brag, they didn't ask, I hate speaking up like this, and I get it. It's not intuitively comfortable for women to simply say, here's this great thing that I did. It's not. We have been trained in the good girl groove for decades of our lives to not brag, to not speak up, to play small, to play it safe, to not take the limelight away, right? We are the first people, you guys have heard me talk about this in other Training Tuesdays, we are the first ones to say, it was a team effort. I got lucky. We're the first ones to deflect what we truly brought to the engagement. So point two is, how are you going to share? Action number one is make sure that you're aligning what you're going to discuss, what you're going to share with goals that matter, with outcomes that matter. Point two is, how are you going to share this information? And you may choose a different channel for sharing this information depending on who it is you're sharing it with. First and foremost, who needs to know? Does your boss need to know? Does your team need to know? Do you have a network of peers who need to know? Who needs to know about the end of this project or the ongoing efforts of this day-to-day exercise? Who does it matter to? If you answered the first question about how this achieves certain business goals or your boss's goals, that will help you answer the second question of, other than my boss, who else needs to know? Now, once you know who you're telling, then it's time to figure out what's the best format. How am I sharing this information about what I accomplished and how it ties to business goals? I have one boss who, it's all about the email. Put it in an email. And honestly, for decades, that's been my habit of just email summary, end of the week, here's what I've done, here's how it affects you, there you go. If nothing else, even if I don't get the rah-rah kudos every week, I at least know that I've informed my boss through a channel that he prefers on what's been going on and how it's moving the needle forward. I've been working with someone more recently who really loves Slack. Now, I'm not a huge Slack user. I'm not used to Slack, but here's what I know. If I want this person to understand what I've been working on, and if I want to get their attention, I better figure out how to use Slack. Now, if you're serving multiple bosses, it might be tiring because you're going over the same information, right? Other people prefer meetings. They prefer a phone call. They prefer a Zoom call. They prefer a one-on-one. That's all fine. The key is that you have one chunk of information, which is, here's what I did, here's why it's valuable, here's what it means to you. And once you have that clear, it's very easy to just draft an email, cut and paste that email into a Slack channel, cut and paste it into a Teams if you're using Microsoft Teams update, cut and paste it into a PowerPoint if you have to do a presentation. Use it as your speaking points when you're talking to your boss on the phone. The key is you've already thought through what the value is. The channel of how you deliver it is twofold. One is you're picking the way that they're going to hear you most. And two, you're not calling your boss to say, or your team members or your peers to say, hey, I need 5 minutes of your time to brag about this thing I did. That's the part that makes us feel icky. When someone walks into the room and they give the old swagger and they tell you, I did this amazing thing, let me tell you about this, right? We shut it off. We immediately kind of tune out and go, please. What you're doing is you're giving an update. You're sharing the end of an event. So whether you frame this as simply, this is an update meeting, this is our weekly one-on-one, or this is even this is a feedback meeting. Hey, I finished this project. I want to tell you the results that I've tracked and that I've seen. Love to hear your feedback as well. There's many ways you can frame it. That while you're not titling this, hey, this is Natalie's 10-minute brag session, that's still what I'm going to do. That's still what I'm going to use the time for. I'm going to use the time to say, hey, boss, welcome to our one-on-one. Just needed to update you on this campaign that we ran. And this is what it looked like. And here's how it brought revenue to the business. And if I can bring that revenue to the business, that's what makes him look good, right? So here's how it brought revenue to the business, which means this is how it impacts our bottom line, which means yay. As far as you're concerned, my team is helping you look good because we're hitting our numbers. Understanding value, that's critical. Number one is value. Number two, how will you share this? What's the channel? Understand your audience and how they prefer to receive information. I had a boss a few years ago. She was all about the review meetings. These operational reviews I was just talking about, she was all about things like that. And so we had weekly executive meetings where I had charts and reports, and it was a pain in the ass to do it, but this is where she saw value. If I could quantify with numbers the activities we were doing and those revenue results, and I could report on that every week, then she saw value in the activities that we were doing. So it's knowing who your audience is and what matters to them. Giving her those charts and those dashboards made her feel like she had control. That's why I did it. I've had other bosses who were like, send me an email with 3 bullets. They don't need to know any more than that. Less worried about control, but still wanted to be informed. So know your audience. Now, telling your boss and telling leadership is important. This is another piece of managing up. Telling your peers or telling the team that works for you is equally important. One, for your peers, you're building that relationship, right? You're building that team relationship that says we're in this together. And what you want to show them is how the projects you're working on interlock with the goals that they have. That's how we build the camaraderie, right? The camaraderie between teams that say we're in this together because our goals are linked. So you want to be able to look at the project and go, okay, I know how this supports my boss. I know how this helps the company. Now let me think about, for my peer group, why does it matter to them? So for somebody who's been in marketing for 30 years, right, that's easy. I need to know how what I'm doing impacts sales first and foremost. Second, what I'm doing, it might impact customer support, right? Customer service or customer support teams. It also probably impacts product and product development because in my marketing campaigns and my conversations then with the people who are coming on board through sales, we're going to learn what parts of our product do they love, what parts do they not love. That's great feedback. With customer service, we're going to be able to say, here's how we're supporting our customer service efforts. Customer service is going to come back to us and say, here's what we're hearing from customers about what they want. So we know how to adjust our marketing messages, right? It's all symbiotic. So how does your role or your team engage with other teams so that you can share that same project information according to what matters to them? What's the value to them? It helps me in both cases, in all cases, before I get on the phone, before I send the email, before I do any of that, to really write it out, to create that outline of here's the value to the business, here's the value to my boss, here's the value to my teams. The more you can quantify that even in hard numbers, if that's something your role allows you to do, the more they pay attention. The other piece is if you have a story that you can incorporate. We remember statistics, we love numbers, and we remember stories. So if you can tell a story about this customer who gave you this quote, or a story about this end user who ran into this challenge, and here's the story of what the challenge was and how we resolved it, we remember those things. Always helps to tell a story in how you're framing that this is why it matters to you. Let me tell you the story about the really unhappy customer and how you guys in customer service turned that around, and how me in marketing, I was able to help you do that. Or I was able to help you reclaim that lost customer. So writing out what you want to say will also help you work through any of the language that you feel like is getting braggy. Anything that makes you feel like you're tooting your own horn too much. You can take the brag and the I out of it and still lead with the success. Still lead with the, here are the metrics, here's the activities, here's the impact. I encourage you to take the credit when credit is due of this is what I did. This is what I did for you. But for those of you who are really uncomfortable with this idea of bragging, take it out the first few times you do this. And let the metrics speak for themselves, but tell the story of why this matters. Here's why my increase this week of 10% more leads into the funnel matters. Because with that 10% more leads, we're going to qualify, let's say 8% more people into our sales pipeline, which means we're going to close 3 more people than we had last week, which is going to translate into X amount of revenue. And if I can keep that trend going where every week or every other week I'm increasing our pipeline by 10%, then by the end of the month, think about how much more revenue we're closing. Like, I can do that math. So you need to look at what you're doing and extrapolate it into the business value that it brings. Whether that's in sales and revenue, whether that's in saved customers, whether that's in new customer acquisition, however you're being measured. Customer success, customer happiness, right? Customer satisfaction numbers, whatever your metrics are. You want to tie the activity you're doing into how you support all of that at the end of the day and remind everybody of that value. That at the end of the day is why they're going to remember who you are and what you do. So when you're sitting there waiting to be recognized, I want you to remember that they're not recognized, double negative. You are not getting recognized because everybody else is busy. And that's really the bottom line. Everybody else is busy with their own separate set of goals, their own separate set of metrics. Their priorities have shifted in the time it took you to stand up from the table and walk out of the room or shut down the Zoom. They've already shifted on to the next thing on their priority list, which may not be on yours. So it is incumbent upon us, if we are going to own our narrative, if we are going to showcase our value and use that showcasing of value to drive our careers to the next level, it is up to us to have the conversation that says, that says, here's the value that I bring. This is what this project was worth to the business. This is what these daily efforts drive for the business. Every week, every month, every quarter, you report how often it matters to you and your business, whatever that cadence is, but always tie it back to value and what matters, most importantly, to your boss. All right, I don't see any more comments or questions, so if you guys are good, I do have the workbook. So if you don't have the workbook, Joyce, I saw you have it. Yay. If you didn't pick up the workbook when I offered it, like I said, I think it was last year, drop the word SMASH in the comments. Drop the word SMASH in the comments, and I'll be sure you get a copy of the workbook. We're going to go through the next 4 blocks over the next 4 weeks. So we'll work through them together. And I would love for you guys, when you show up, to grab the pen and follow along and ask through. There are the questions in the workbook of what to think through and sort through as you work through each one of these obstacles. So thank you for joining me for Training Tuesday tonight. As always, it is lovely to see you guys, and I look forward to seeing you next week. And just remember, drop the word SMASH if you want a copy of the workbook, and I will shoot it your way, I think through Facebook Messenger. I can send it to you guys. Have a great night.